Hello, everyone, and welcome to our 8th LinkedIn Live talking about digital transformation as part of my series, DX Bridging the Divide. I'm really excited today to be talking about digital transformation actually happening, talking about success stories, talking about really making digital transformation work. Because I think a lot of time people feel like digital transformation is just another buzzword and, I need to be able to talk about it, but it's not actually going to change anything. And so today I'm unbelievably thrilled to have Alissa Hsu Lynch here as my guest. Alissa, in addition to being a college classmate, is a former J&J, former Google person who has just done some really phenomenal things in her life. So I'm going to more of a bio, and then we're going to dive into hearing about what information actually looks like. Alissa?
Yes, so Bridget, thanks so much for having me. And it was really fun to reconnect with you earlier this year in Mexico, of all places, and to learn that we both have this passion for digital transformation. So thanks for having me in this event. So I'm Alissa, and I am currently an entrepreneur in residence for a healthcare diagnostics venture fund. And I also am a board director for corporate and nonprofit boards. But before this time, I spent 25 years in operating roles, as you mentioned, at Johnson & Johnson and Google. And at J&J, I worked on both the consumer businesses and then moved over to their medical device businesses. And most recently at Google, I was part of the Google Cloud organization leading Google's MedTech strategy. So essentially working with companies, helping them on digital transformation. So it's great to be here.
Fantastic. Thanks so much for coming. So the biggest mistake that I think digital transformation, after the whole not even doing it in the first place, is thinking that it's something that happens in the IT department, that this is about making your infrastructure more modern, that this is something your CIO should be running, that as long as you are now on cloud or as long as you have something in blockchain, that you are digitally transformed because you are up to date or something like that. In fact, digital transformation should really be run by the businesses, right? Because it's about transforming your business using digital, not transforming your digital. And so what I'm excited to talk about today is not just a success of hey, here's a case where this worked well, but we're going to talk about two different cases that happen in very different parts of the business, and how digital transformation can happen in, products that you're using, tools, part of your go-to-market. It can happen in the product that you're delivering yourself. It can happen anywhere in the business where you could do a better job of what you're trying to do.
Yeah, so I 100% agree. I think digital transformation is really about business transformation and has to align with your business strategy. So it shouldn't just be viewed as a technology play in itself. And it shouldn't be relegated to the IT or back office departments, although those functions are really critical for successful digital transformation, because if there's resistance to change from your IT department, you're not actually going to be successful. But I want to share a story from when I was working at J&J, and I first joined the medtech business, which was in Europe. And the orthopedics business there was facing some significant challenges. Historically, their business had been built using a large sales force that established direct relationships with hospitals and doctors. And frankly, that model wasn't working quite as well as before. So sales were starting to decline. And when I got there, we really recognized that there was one major issue, and that was the lack of data. So without data, we actually weren't able to really understand what was happening with the business, what were the key drivers, why were some sales teams better than others. And so we decided to implement a sales CRM system, which sounds pretty basic, but it was a pretty major undertaking, actually.
I mean, it's so interesting that you say that, because every single company I've ever seen put in a CRM system feels like it's something that every other company does, like, overnight. And they're the only ones that don't have good, clean data on their people, don't have good processes that they want to use, whatever. And so every company struggles through this. How do I actually take advantage of technology that's out there to go to market differently?
Absolutely. And there were definitely some things we wanted to get out of it. So, again, going back to what is your business strategy? What are your business objectives? We really wanted to improve our sales forecasting. So, honestly, it was very reliant on individual sales reps, and it wasn't so good. So, we didn't get great visibility to when customers were going to place large orders. And then, of course, that created major issues for the supply chain organization. They would have to scramble, and it led to poor customer service. So improving Salesforce accuracy was number one. The second thing is we wanted to do a better job of customer segmentation and targeting. So we knew we had some really big customers, we had some customers that we wanted to grow, and some that we wanted to actually acquire. But we didn't understand, from a data-based perspective, what made them the best customers. And we wanted to improve like our tier 1, 2, and 3, develop more clear criteria, and then use data to actually segment the customers. So that was the number 2, is customer segmentation. And then the third one you mentioned is just better understanding why were certain sales teams and certain sales reps, why were they the top performers? So, they would be well recognized and rewarded, but we honestly wanted to understand, what are they doing? What are their behaviors? What are the key drivers? What makes their customer, what is that unique ecosystem or that perfect storm that they're able to create, so that we can scale that to the rest of the sales organization and then raise the level of the entire organization. So those were 3 of the key pain points and the key business objectives that we were going after.
See, and that's so great, because I think a lot of times people feel like CRM is just how the sellers are going to keep track, or how you're going to be able to keep track of the status of deals, right? And in that case, you're way underutilizing the potential of what you can do, and you're not actually transforming the culture as you install it. So you're not going to get the benefits, and your business case might never close. So it sounds like you guys went into it really eyes wide open in terms of, hey, we have some pretty aggressive goals in terms of what we want to transform.
Yes, and I love that you bring up culture, because that was one of the biggest barriers we face. So it sounds simple, like we have these clear goals, we have the system selected, now let's just implement it. But it was actually very challenging to get a sales organization that was very used to doing things the way that they had traditionally done it, to adopt this new system they weren't familiar with. And they wanted to be spending time with their customers. They didn't want to be spending time inputting data into this new technology system that they didn't understand the value of. So we had to overcome this cultural resistance to change, which is a very common barrier that companies face when they're embarking on digital transformation, and focus on the value for the sales reps, and then also support them with sales training and processes. So we had to put those in place to drive adoption of the system. But even though we did those things, there was still initially very low compliance in the sales teams actually using the system. So when we recognized that, we moved from sort of the carrot approach to then using the stick. And we actually tied sales compensation to whether or not a salesperson input data into the system. And we also held managers accountable for reviewing the data. Initially, I think because we wanted to drive adoption, we did it weekly, and then we moved to monthly. But we held managers accountable for reviewing the data and discussing it with their teams. And fast forward, we did get adoption. We were able to address those initial business objectives, sales forecasting improved. We had much clearer customer segmentation, and we were able to incorporate the learnings and the insights from the top performers to modify our sales training and try to roll that out across the entire sales team. So it was a long process and painful at times, but really great learnings that I hope other organizations can take to heart.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Somebody just commented in the chat about change management being key and incenting for the desired behaviors. And it is, I mean, so often, especially with digital transformation, people get sucked into believing as long as the system works, everything's good. But, you know, as I tell my technology counterparts all the time, you have the easy job. You know, it's always fun to say that because they're like, what? And I'm like, but it's really hard to make people actually change. And unfortunately it is. And it's interesting when you made the comparison between the carrot and the stick, because, you know, it wasn't such a big stick, right? It was like, hey guys, this is part of your job and you're not going to get paid if you don't do all of your job, right? Like that's more of a truth in some ways than a real stick, I would say. But it is something until they start seeing their own benefit, right? All they feel like is, oh, when they know more, they're going to expect me to get deals closed faster. They're going to expect me to make bigger deals. They're going to expect that this deal is already going to be closed. And so people don't want to share information because they've been burned. And so what you're trying to do is you're trying to change and say, look, we're all going to benefit from sharing the information. But sometimes getting people over that first hurdle can be tough. And so I think the balance that you guys had with the carrot and the stick was probably a good solution.
Yeah, and I think also, you know, it was an example of implementing a sales CRM system, and agree with Susan's comments around change management is so critical. What gets measured,
Yeah.
you know, what is the term? What gets measured matters.
Yes.
But overall, it helped transform the culture to a more data-driven culture, and that's ultimately what our goal was. So there are benefits beyond just the sales CRM system on the overall culture.
Well, and that's so interesting too, because fundamentally what we're trying to do with digital transformation is actually build a culture of transformation, not just install a CRM system or, you know, put in a new, you know, cloud-based blah, 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 right? We're trying to say, just because we did things this way for a long time doesn't mean that that's the best way to do it going forward. And if we want to stay competitive, if we want to be one of the leaders in our industry, we need to continue to evolve. And that's going to be evolving across the entire business. It's going to be the sales guys. It's going to be the marketing team. It's going to be the product team. It's going to be the customer success team, right? All of these teams need to be thinking about not just what is their job, all of what they're doing, right? And that's where transformation happens. And I think for you to focus on data is awesome, because that is going to help people understand which parts of the transformation are actually helpful, right? What you measure matters.
Absolutely.
Okay, fantastic. So let's go then from sort of, okay, here's how we interact with customers, to the other side, which is what is it that we're actually giving to our customers right now, right? Like, what is it that we have that is different, and how do we make sure that that continues to stay appealing to customers?
Yeah, so I have an example I wanted to share from my time at Google, where I launched a new tech solution called Medical Imaging Suite, still out in the marketplace. And this new medical imaging suite was really to offer our healthcare customers the tools and technologies that Google actually uses themselves to develop AI algorithms to interpret medical images. So think of medical images as X-rays, CT scans, MRI. And We were solving for a couple key pain points for customers. So clearly you need to start with what is the problem to solve versus here we have all these great tools and technologies, use them. And you know, a lot of tech companies, that is something that I observed in going to Google. They do love their technology because it is fantastic technology, but my role was really to help translate that technology to how it could actually help solve business problems. And so this new medical imaging suite was really to help organizations, healthcare organizations, with interpreting medical images and helping them accelerate development of AI to do that using Google's tools. And the problem is that medical images are huge. They're complex. They've been growing in size, and it's largely manual. So radiologists are the ones who are reading a lot of these medical images. They have to read these images and make a diagnosis and determine, like, what does this mean for the patient? But we knew that there's a shortage of radiologists, and all healthcare workers are overburdened, particularly since COVID. And so, you know, there's a backlog, there's a wait. Patients have to, you know, they're waiting to be diagnosed, and it's just not easy to do. So we wanted to address that big overall problem with AI. But we quickly recognized that AI was not necessarily being adopted by radiologists. So even if healthcare organizations, we help them develop this AI, getting the end user to actually use the AI. So our customer was the healthcare organization that wanted to develop the AI algorithms, but their end customer was the radiologists and the readers of the images. And there was resistance to adopting AI, you know, be it fear of being replaced or just unfamiliarity with the technology, or they're just too busy. They're overburdened. They've got enough on their plate. So we also recognized, even though the radiologist was the end customer, not our primary customer, we actually had to help our primary customer think about how do you actually drive adoption successfully for the users of your AI. So that was an interesting problem to think through.
And I love the way that you're contextualizing it around, let's back away from the technology, right? Like, let's stop. Yes, it's great technology, but let's stop thinking about how great it is and think about what it does to solve the problem, because that's really what matters to the end user. And with this transformation that you try to do, anytime you go in and you say, hey, I have the best new shiny object, you get all of the people who like shiny objects, but you don't necessarily get the people to change the way they do their job.
Yeah, and I think it was really great learning for me because I was so focused on our primary customer and the needs that they had initially. So they have all these huge, large images. They need to get those into the cloud. They need to standardize the data, make it interoperable, and then they need to figure out how do we actually develop AI. And you know, so we were providing labeling tools and, of course, cloud storage and management, and then letting them use our AI development platform. And that was the bulk of what the solution was. But then we started to hear from their users on, well, I'm not sure that we need this. And so I really learned, okay, we need to work with our customers to help them, and they needed help from Google in thinking through how do we actually make this successful, because ultimately we all had the same end goal of, you know, easing the burden for radiologists and ultimately, you know, enabling faster, more accurate diagnoses for patients themselves. So we would meet with clinicians. We would ask that they have their lead clinical champion, so, you know, the head of the radiology department, actually on the call when we were talking about the technology, because you need to ensure that there are internal champions at the organization, that it's not just the senior executives that want to adopt the shiny new technology and do a joint press release with Google, but also actually drive adoption and make sure that it's going to work for the users. And so through that feedback, we learned that it's really critical with these emerging technologies to make sure that you are thinking about how does it embed or complement their existing workflow. Because if it's an entirely different system that they need to learn, or they need to switch and it's going to take more time to switch over to this other system or walk over there or whatever, they're not going to use it. So we were not the ones who would embed it into the workflow. That would be our customer's job to do, but we definitely had those conversations and made sure that they were starting to think about that, even as they were just embarking on development of the AI itself.
Yeah, it's so interesting. We tend to think about, the customer as the one who pays the bills or signs the contract. And in, I would say, every case I've ever been involved in, there's more of an ecosystem than we realize, whether it's within one company or a multi-company ecosystem. And the dependence on those people who are worried about the regulatory issues, worried about the legal implications, worried about, how many different platforms and screens do you want me to use every day? Worried about, whatever it is that somebody else cares about really impacts your ability to change the way that you do something in your business. And so even if you come out with the best mousetrap in the entire world, this can catch any mouse, right? Like if it does things that don't work for people in the way they currently do stuff now, like if in order to put in this mousetrap, you have to leave the house for 5 days. Well, I just want the mouse out of my house right now, right? Like I can't leave for 5 days. I got to go to work. And so we need to think about not just building the best product, which, you guys were trying to do, but delivering it in a way that people actually use it. So what kind of tipped the balance for you in terms of, do you think, in really making that happen?
Yeah, so I think it's your voice of customer, just make sure you incorporate voice of customer, and also work with those end users on identifying really specific use cases. So I think for us, we were thinking, oh, AI for medical imaging, great. They're going to use it. It's going to improve. It's going to be faster. But you really have to get a little bit more granular than that. And what we learned is that, and this would differ from customer to customer, that AI, okay, if the radiologist is afraid potentially of being replaced, then maybe the AI should be augmenting their job and making it easier for them. So instead of making the actual diagnosis, which is something that they are trained, they're experts on doing, it can do pre-screening. So what they call patient triage. So screen the images before if they get to the radiologist to help prioritize the ones that look like they have anomalies and prioritize those for the radiologist to look at first. So patient triage was actually a very relevant use case. And then also think of like getting a second opinion. So the AI can provide a second opinion. So the radiologist is still doing their core job that they're trained to do, that they're experts in doing. But then the AI, in some cases, can see things, computer vision can see things that the human eye can't see. And so why not use that for getting a so-called second opinion? And maybe it might catch some false positives or see something that the radiologist just happened to miss. And so sort of the pre and post of the diagnosis is a great way that AI can be applied in radiology. And I think that's where a lot of the organizations we were working with decided to start, also because it's a longer regulatory pathway to actually prove that the AI is as accurate as a radiologist in making a diagnosis.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, I'm a techno geek. I've been doing digital for a long time. I would want a person, if I had a big health scare, I would love the AI to look at it, but I would also want the person to look at it. And that's
Absolutely.
just, we're not
And
quite
I think
there.
that's where AI, especially in healthcare, is best used. It's augmenting the doctor or the clinician in doing, and also helping them do their job faster.
Now, a lot of times we see sort of people really putting up barriers for something that changes their workflow. I think you talked about talking to them and making sure that you understand it, changing the focus. If everything that we do with digital trend be about, or if a lot of it really changes workflow, what do you think we can do sort of from the get-go, right, to somebody complaining, to make sure that we're anticipating problems?
Yeah, so one of the things we thought a lot about at Google is understanding the value that the technology provides, and start with a pilot. A lot of large organizations are more comfortable starting with pilots and get some data. So I'm going to come back to the data theme that we had before, but demonstrate that there is actually a benefit for the end user. So in the medical imaging example, AI can actually do that preliminary screening or diagnosis in a matter of seconds. And that then allows the radiologist from having to review all of those scans themselves to focus on the most important cases much, much faster, and then have more time to spend with patients. So figure out what are those metrics that matter and get some initial data, because just talking about it, like, yeah, I get the concept, but until you actually demonstrate it, so you need to, in the tech world, prototype, test, iterate, learn. And that's what I think a lot of larger organizations should be adopting, is that whole agile methodology, because it helps you make the case and also demonstrate that the technology actually has benefits.
It's so interesting because I talk a lot about culture, building this culture of transformation. And part of that within an organization really can be about creating trust that transformation is going to be generally good, right? And if you're sharing data every time you do transformation about the benefits to your sales team, to your clients, to the patients, right? If people are seeing, hey, we believe in transformation, and the reason is because look how good the numbers look. Look how good it is for satisfaction. Look how good it is for revenue. Look how good it is for life expectancy. Right? If you're showing these actual numbers on a regular basis and making the entire team think about how, again, this is not the CIO's job. This is not a technical change. This is a fundamental business transformation, and one that we see as benefiting the company and all of us over time. I think really being proactive about sharing those metrics, those success numbers, can build a lot of trust in that foundation of that transformation culture.
Yeah, I would also add, because you just made me think of this from a culture perspective, is lean on. So I think the example of having a champion within the organization is really critical. But also at least in healthcare, there are key opinion leaders. I think in every industry, there are key opinion leaders. And if you work with those key opinion leaders and they are advocates, they become advocates of the new technology, whether it be from the data or they're leading a study, or they just personally are more innovative in the industry and they want to adopt the new technology, that can really help as well. So I think it's both the data, but also the people, and finding the right people to become ambassadors for that digital transformation.
That's fantastic. So I think we're running up against the end of our time. I mean, I want to continue listening to you because, as somebody who's been in the trenches, who's seen this happen or made this happen multiple times, you've gotten out relatively unscathed and very successful. And I think this helps people understand that no matter what the technology is, right? Like everybody right now is excited about AI. AI is going to change the world. But, a couple of years ago, blockchain was going to change the world, and quantum was going to change the world, and cloud was going to change the world, and internet was going to change the world. And in fact, they all have changed the world. They've all done their part in advancing what it is we can do. But we need to be careful that we're using these tools to transform. We're not just, building cool things. So thank you, Alissa, so much for coming and talking about these wonderful successes and especially the lessons learned, because I really think that these are really concrete tactical things that people can do in terms of, setting the stage for success as they look at building out digital transformation.
Thanks so much for having me, Bridget. And I'll just leave the viewers with one thought. So definitely all these emerging technologies, it's still a journey. It's evolving very quickly. But I think for organizations that want to pursue some kind of technology or digital transformation, I love this mantra of dream big, start small, act now.
Yes.
So I think that captures, kind of the big ambition, but you really just have to start with an actual problem to solve and just go, experiment, get going.
Fantastic. Yes, that is an absolute perfect way to land. Thank you, everybody, for coming and listening to Alissa talk about digital transformation successes. And we'll see you next time. Goodbye. Good night. Goodbye.